questions, I'll let the front bench change over. Right, we come to the statement. I call the Secretary of State, Michael Gove.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. And with your permission, I'd like to make a statement about the next steps that we are taking in the government strategy to counter extremism and to build greater national resilience and social cohesion. The United Kingdom is a success story, a multinational, multi-ethnic, multi-faith democracy, stronger because of our diversity. But our democracy and our values of inclusivity and tolerance are under challenge from extremist groups which are radicalising our young people and driving greater polarisation within and between communities to further their own ends. In order to protect our democratic values and enhance social cohesion, it is important both to reinforce what we all have in common and to be clear and precise in identifying the dangers posed by extremism. As our new definition makes clear, extremism can lead to the radicalisation of individuals, deny people their full rights and opportunities, suppress freedom of expression, incite hatred, weaken social cohesion, and ultimately, it can lead to acts of terrorism. Most extremist materials and activities are not illegal and do not meet a terrorism or national security threshold. For example, Islamist and neo-Nazi groups in Britain are operating lawfully, but they advocate and work towards the replacement of democracy with an Islamist or Nazi society. The Department for Levelling Up Housing in Communities has been working with local authorities, civil society and faith groups, especially in those areas where social cohesion is most under strain, to de-escalate tensions and to explore the most constructive support that we can offer. From our engagement, we hear widespread unease over the safety and security of community organisations, political candidates and elected officials. Councillors have been threatened with violence, council meetings have been disrupted, council officers and elected members talk of walking a tightrope, terrified of inadvertently saying the wrong thing, of offending one side or another. Many choose to remain silent, to take no action. Mr. Speaker, such is the chilling effect of these extremist groups on our democracy. It is, of course, gravely concerning that the conflict in the Middle East is driving further polarisation. We've seen a terrible increase in anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim hate crime, as well as a very significant increase in radicalisation. Troublingly, there is also evidence that some Islamists and extreme right-wing groups and others who seek to tear our society apart are working together to maximise the reach of their message and cause. And that is why the work of civil society organisations such as the Community Security Trust and Tel Mama, as well as Muslims Against Anti-Semitism, the educational charity Solutions Not Sides, and the Forum for Discussion of Israel and Palestine is so important. We've provided additional funding for the CST and Tel Mama to counter anti-Semitism and anti-Muslim hatred, and we will do more. We will shortly establish a new fund to provide additional, direct and tangible support for grassroots organisations building bridges and fighting division. I wish to commend those doing so much to counter prejudice. In working with civil society, it's critically important that we do not, unwittingly or through ignorance, fund or otherwise support organisations or individuals who are themselves extremist. In the past, it has unfortunately been the case that extremist groups and actors have sought to present themselves as moderate voices, representative of majority or mainstream opinion. The government has had a definition of extremism since 2011. It has helped inform our prevent counter-terrorism work and was designed to assist the government in engagement. But in a considerable number of cases, organisations and individuals with views which are clearly extreme have nevertheless benefited from state engagement, endorsement and support, and furthermore have exploited that association to further their extremist agendas. Among the most significant was Shakil Beg, who was labelled an Islamist extremist by a judge. Mr. Beg, an NHS chaplain and regular speaker at state schools, ran the Lewisham Islamic Centre and was on both the Metropolitan Police's Independent Advisory Group in Lewisham and Lewisham's Standing Advisory Committee on Religious Education. In 2016, Mr. Beg sued the BBC when they described him, accurately, as an extremist. The judge in the case, Mr. Justice Haddon Cave, conducted his own scrupulous research, identifying many occasions where Mr. Beg had advocated extreme positions, including promoting and encouraging religious violence, by telling a Muslim audience that violence in support of Islam would constitute a man's greatest deed. Not only did Mr. Justice Haddon Cave dismiss Mr. Begg's claim, he drew specific attention to the danger of extremists exploiting sponsorship from state institutions. and he outlined the need for an updated and more precise definition of extremism to guide engagement by government and others. And we have since seen how figures of potential extremism concern have been able to work with the Crown Prosecution Service and the Metropolitan Police, co-opt charities, and indeed benefit from public funding. And we know from William Shawcross's excellent independent review of Prevent that such engagement has inadvertently provided a platform, funding, or legitimacy for groups or individuals who oppose our shared values. This apparent legitimising of their views can lead extremists of all ideologies to be emboldened and to exert greater influence. That's why today my department is publishing an updated, more precise and rigorous definition of extremism, alongside a set of cross-government engagement principles for use when engaging with external groups. There is also detailed guidance on what the definition does and does not capture. And we're also setting up a new counter-extremism centre of excellence in my department as a world-leading authority on best practice, data and research. Mr. Speaker, our plans, drawn up in close collaboration with the Home Office, will enable the government to express more clearly than ever before which groups fall within the extremism definition, and we can point to the evidence and explain the funding and engagement consequences. They will also support national efforts to counter the work of extremists who promote their ideologies both online and offline. The new definition will strengthen vital frontline counter-radicalisation work, and the new Centre of Excellence will also help us to understand the role played by state actors and state-linked organisations in extremist activity which is taking place in our country. And the wider knowledge of what constitutes extremist behaviour and who is behind it will, I hope, help all of us to identify potential threats and to take steps to challenge and marginalise them. Critically, the rights that we enjoy in the United Kingdom extend to everyone. Freedom of expression, freedom of religion and belief, the rule of law, upholding democracy and equal rights, these are the cornerstones of our civilised society, which as a government, as a parliament, on every side of this House, we strive always to uphold. So let me be clear, our definition will not affect gender-critical campaigners, those with conservative religious beliefs, trans activists, environmental protest groups, or those exercising their proper right to free speech. The government has taken every possible precaution to strike a balance in drawing up the new definition between protecting fundamental rights and safeguarding citizens. Our definition draws on the work of Dame Sarah Khan, the government's independent reviewer of social cohesion, and Sir Mark Rowley, the Metropolitan Police Commissioner, before his appointment to that post. The proposed definition will hold that extremism is the promotion or advancement of an ideology based on violence, hatred or intolerance that aims to negate or destroy the fundamental rights and freedoms of others, or undermine, overturn or replace the UK's system of liberal parliamentary democracy and democratic rights, or intentionally create a permissive environment for others to achieve these results. It is important to stress that we are in no way intending to restrict freedom of expression, religion or belief. But the government cannot be in a position where, unwittingly or not, we sponsor, subsidise or support in any way organisations and individuals opposed to the freedoms we hold dear. Across this House, I am sure that we would agree that organisations such as the British National Socialist Movement and Patriotic Alternative, who promote neo-Nazi ideology, argue for forced repatriation, a white ethno-state and the targeting of minority groups for intimidation, are precisely the type of groups about which we should be concerned and whose activities we will assess against the new definition. The activities of the extreme right wing are a growing worry. The targeting of both Muslim and Jewish communities and individuals by these groups is a profound concern requiring concerted action. And it is important, just as with our definition of extremism, to be precise in the use of language when discussing Islamism. Islamism should never be confused with Islam. Islam is a great faith, a religion of peace, which provides spiritual nourishment to millions, inspires countless acts of charity, and celebrates virtues of generosity, compassion, and kindness. Islamism is a totalitarian ideology which seeks to divide, calls for the establishment of an Islamic state governed by Sharia law, and seeks the overthrow of liberal democratic principles. It has its roots in the thinking of the founder of the Muslim Brotherhood, Hassan al-Banna, the founder of Jamaat-e-Islami, Abu al-Maududi, and the Muslim Brotherhood ideologue, Said Qutb. The Palestinian branch of the Muslim Brotherhood is, of course, Hamas. Organisations such as the Muslim Association of Britain, which is the British affiliate of the Muslim Brotherhood, and other groups such as Cage and MEND, give rise to concern for their Islamist orientation and views. We will be holding these and other organisations to account to assess if they meet our definition of extremism, and will take action as appropriate. There are, of course, further steps that we will take in the coming days and weeks to marginalise extremist groups and to support and strengthen those communities where extremists are most active and spreading division. This will include responding to Dame Sarah Khan's forthcoming report on social cohesion and democratic resilience, and Lord Walney's independent review of how to counter political violence and disruption. In this debate, we must never forget about the experiences of victims of extremism who are targeted by extremist groups and the severe and distressing impact it has on their lives. So I'm pleased that Dame Sarah Khan will be addressing this in her forthcoming report. As the Prime Minister has said, the time has come for us all to stand together to combat the forces of division and to beat this poison. The liberties that we hold dear, and indeed the democratic principles we're all sent here to uphold, require us to counter and challenge the extremists who seek to intimidate, to coerce and to divide. We have to be clear-eyed about the threat we face, precise about where that threat comes from, and rigorous in defending our democracy. That means upholding freedom of expression, religion and belief when they are threatened, facing down harassment and hate, supporting the communities facing the greatest challenge from extremist activity, and ensuring this House and this country are safe, free and united. I commend this statement to the House.
I now call the Shadow Secretary of State, Angela Rayner.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I start by thanking the Secretary of State for advance sight of this statement and for his briefing yesterday. Hateful extremism threatens the safety of our communities and the unity of our country. Everyone across this House can agree that this is a serious problem which demands a serious response. So I want to begin by saying from the outset, when it comes to our national security, when it comes to the threat of radicalisation, when it comes to the toxic scourge of Islamophobia, neo-Nazism, anti-Semitism or any other corrosive hatred, the whole House can and should work together. The way the government does this work matters, and the language that we all use is important. And I want to welcome the Secretary of State's opening words that it is our diversity and our values which make our country stronger. Indeed, the Secretary of State is right to raise the concerns about the dangers facing our elected representatives. We must be free to represent the views of our constituents. We all have a responsibility to work to extinguish the flames of division and never to fan them. While it may be part of the nature of our politics for passion to sometimes take centre stage, and while we may challenge and probe these plans today, if the Secretary of State wants to engage going forward, he has my word that we can do so in good faith. And the reason that I say challenge is because I do believe he's made a mistake in the way that this policy has been trailed in the last week. So I'm glad that he's now come to the House to give clarification. But it is not right that we have spent the last few days poring over a possible new definition in the papers. And it's not right that the Department has leaked the names of groups that may or may not be covered by this definition when he rightly says this work should be based on due diligence. And it is not right that each stage of the recruitment of a new Islamophobia advisor has been mired in controversy. So can the Secretary of State confirm he has now appointed an advisor? So on today's announcement, Mr. Speaker, we will scrutinise this new definition, and it will be crucial to see the way it is applied in practice. But can I ask the Secretary of State to set out today how the new Centre of Excellence will operate and how it will be resourced? And can he confirm how this new definition will work in practice? How exactly will it restrict the government's engagement? And can he explain whether these restrictions will only relate to government engagement or later extended to other public bodies such as the police and universities? Given this new definition, the public will rightly be alarmed at the idea that government ministers could already have met with extremist groups. Can the Secretary of State shed some light on this? Renewed vigilance and diligence is welcome, particularly in the current climate, but if his own department now needs to cut ties with extremist groups, it begs the question why they were working with them in the first place. And given he says this will not affect gender-critical campaigners, those with conservative religious beliefs, trans activists, environmental protest groups, or those exercising their proper right to free speech, can the Secretary of State explain which groups this new definition will affect and where the government has chosen to draw the line? Mr. Speaker, this is not the first time that the government has identified this risk or promised to act. As the Secretary of State mentions in his opening, at the beginning of 2011, well back then, the Conservative Home Secretary told the House that if organisations do not support the values of democracy, human rights, equality before law, participation in society, we will not work with them and we will not fund them. It begs the question, why has it taken the government 13 years to address this? The Secretary of State says that organisations which are clearly extreme have benefited from government engagement, endorsement and support, and even suggests that those groups have exploited government engagement. Can he understand how deeply concerning this is to hear? He must explain exactly how this has been allowed to happen. Mr. Speaker, we know that there has been a huge surge in online extremism. And can the Secretary of State give assurance on how this will be dealt with? What action he is taking to work cross-government to assess and confront online hate? We know that extremism doesn't exist in a vacuum, and we need political leadership on this. But a quality of good leadership is to empower others. The Secretary of State says that the Department has been working with faith groups, civil society and local councils, and I agree that they all have a crucial role to play in tackling extremism. But what form has that consultation taken, and will he publish the findings of that consultation? And on the wider work now needed, can the Secretary of State set out if this work will be underpinned by a new cross-government counter-extremism strategy, given the last one is now 9 years out of date? Will it include action to rebuild the resilience and cohesion of our communities? And he mentions new funding. How much will that funding be, and how will it be allocated? And how will it interact with other funding streams, including the multi-faith dialogue? Mr. Speaker, I also want to raise the point about hate crime and how important this is to tackling extremism. We have seen an appalling surge of anti-Semitism and Islamophobia in recent months, and the previous strategy is now 4 years out of date. Can I ask the Secretary of State, when will he have an updated hate crime action plan? And have ministers abandoned plans to bring forward a new hate crime strategy? And can I ask the Minister, why is the Anti-Muslim Hatred Working Group and the Anti-Semitism Working Group no longer meeting? We need much stronger action to tackle the corrosive forms of hatred that devastate lives and corrode communities. But today's statement does not go far enough. And regardless of how workable and effective this new definition and centre of excellence is, this announcement will not be enough. I want to finish by echoing the words of the Archbishops of Canterbury and York and their warnings that against the backdrop of growing divisions, it is for political leaders to provide a conciliatory tone and to pursue policies that bring us together, not risk dividing us apart. I look forward to working with the Secretary of State on this.
Secretary of State.
Well, I'm very grateful to the Shadow Secretary of State for the constructive, detailed and consensual approach that she's taking to what are inevitably challenging and difficult issues. I enjoyed the opportunity to talk to her and other Labour colleagues yesterday. I look forward to working together in the future, and I know it is the role of the opposition to challenge, and the constructive way in which challenge has been issued today is something which I wholeheartedly welcome. Can I also say that I agree with the Shadow Secretary of State that the danger to elected representatives is growing, and it is something which my right honourable friend, the Security Minister, has invested time, care and money to counter. And can I also say, of course, passion, vigour, determination is part of the meat of our politics, and nothing in anything that we have said today should take away from our desire to see free speech exercised as energetically as possible. The Shadow Secretary of State mentioned the leaking of some information relating to our work on this. I deprecate that leaking. It is fundamentally a challenge to the effective operation of government, and a leak inquiry has been commissioned in order to see how some of the information about our statement today was shared. But, Mr. Speaker, there is an opportunity for all of us, as a result of my having given the statement, to scrutinise the detail. The Shadow Secretary of State talks of the Centre of Excellence, how it will be staffed, how it will be funded. Impartial civil servants with training in this area will be supplemented in their work by studies by academics and academic bodies. And of course, we will work with the existing expertise in the Homeland Security Analysis and Intelligence Unit within the Home Office in order to ensure that all our work is rigorous. And we will make sure that if a decision is made to list an organisation as extremist, that we will show our working, as it were, that the evidence which leads us to that conclusion and the judgment that we have made will be there for everyone to see. The Shadow Secretary of State asked, of course, why it was the case that in the past, government or arms of the state had unwittingly involved themselves or been engaged with extremist organisations. It's because the definition, while well-intentioned and drawn up with care, was perhaps insufficiently precise and perhaps insufficiently policed, that we thought it was appropriate to update that definition. And this follows on, of course, from the Shakil Beg